Good morning. It is December 22nd, coming to you live from Seoul. We start with the stories making the headlines at this hour. A cold wave continues on Friday, with the perceived temperature even lower due to strong winds. Meanwhile, the country is seeing a rapid surge in illnesses related to the cold weather. South Korea's top court ruled in favor of Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor, ordering the Japanese companies responsible to compensate the victims. Over in the Czech Republic, a mass shooting at Charles University in Prague has killed at least 14 people. Authorities say the 24-year-old suspected gunman has also died. A cold wave continues on Friday, with the perceived temperature even lower due to strong winds. Meanwhile, the country is seeing a rapid surge in illnesses related to the cold weather. Lee Seung-jae has more.
Thursday was the coldest day of the season so far, with many people on the streets of South Korea struggling to keep themselves warm.
I didn't really notice the cold up to 2 days ago, but today my ears and nose feel like they're frozen.
We arrived in Seoul on 18th of December, and I think today is the coolest.
The cold wave warning is still in effect for most of the country on Friday. And with the wind chill, the perceived temperatures will be even greater for many parts of the nation. Morning temperatures in the metropolitan area, inland and mountainous areas of Gangwon-do Province, Chungcheongbuk-do Province, and northern regions of Gyeongsangbuk-do Province dropped to around minus 15 degrees Celsius. The capital Seoul saw the mercury dipping to minus 13.8 degrees. Snow continues to fall in Jeju and the Jeolla provinces, with the resort island set for 3 to 8 centimeters of snow until Saturday, while the mountain regions of the island will see up to 20 centimeters. 3 to 8 centimeters of snow is forecast on the west coast of Jeollabuk-do Province, West Gwangju, and Jeollanam-do Province. Since last Saturday, cold-related illnesses have also been on the rise due to a sharp drop in temperatures nationwide. According to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency on Thursday, the cumulative number of patients with temperature-related illnesses nationwide from the 1st to the 20th of this month, when counting began, was 85, while 1 death was reported. The death was reported in Gangwon-do Province, where a man in his 90s was found dead in his home due to hypothermia. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
It is South Korea's first winter since downgrading the infection level of COVID-19 to its lowest and treating it like seasonal flu. But the easing of COVID-19 restrictions has also come with surging cases of other respiratory diseases that are spreading across the nation simultaneously. For more on this latest trend, we're joined by Dr. Alice Tan. Dr. Tan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Doctor, first of all, the country is seeing flu, pneumonia, and COVID-19 circulating all together at the same time. How serious is the situation?
Right. According to the KDCA, during the first week of December, we logged the highest number of influenza-like illness cases in the community over the last 5 years. So this represents about a 1.6-fold increase in the number of patients who are coming in with high fever and flu-like symptoms into the outpatient setting over the last 4 weeks. So one almost 2-fold increase over the last month. And so we are seeing a lot of cases of people who are having acute respiratory illnesses. In terms of the seriousness, I would say the most serious indicator right now is the increasing number of people who are age 65 and older who are admitted to the hospital because of acute respiratory illnesses. So this older population is making up about 40% of people in general wards and 50% of people in ICUs who are admitted due to an acute respiratory illness. In terms of what people are infected with, of the influenza-like illnesses, 42% were actual influenza cases. But we're also seeing an increase in bacterial pneumonia cases that are coming in. There has been an increase. It seems to maybe have plateaued in terms of the cases of mycoplasma pneumonia and streptococcal pneumonia. But right now, this is, we're heading into the peak, I think, of acute respiratory illness season. Usually it's the last week of December, first week of January is when we see the peak.
Well, Dr. Tan, you talked about the spread among older population, but the outbreak is also spreading predominantly among young children too. Why is that?
Right. So as you mentioned, we're seeing a lot of respiratory illnesses in children as well. 1/5 of the patients who are in ICUs due to respiratory illness are children between the ages of 1 and 6. In terms of the reason, I think one reason might be a relatively low uptake of influenza vaccination. Of the children between ages 6 months and 13 years who were supposed to get 2 doses, only 43% received that second dose. And so that means they do not have that full immunity against influenza. And of course, influenza spreads very easily in indoor settings, in places where people are congregated. The other respiratory viruses as well, rhinovirus and the bacterial pneumonia causes also spread very easily in indoor settings. And because it's so cold, everyone is congregating indoors. And I think that's the reason why we're seeing an increased spread in schools, in hagwons, where kids are in indoor settings together.
Right. Now, is it possible for us to catch more than one respiratory disease at once? And what happens when we do?
Right. So during the acute phase of the COVID-19 pandemic, there were several cases, documented cases of people who had co-infection of COVID-19 and influenza. Certainly, you can get co-infected with 2 viral strains of a respiratory illness. Unfortunately, when you do have a co-infection, that usually leads to a more severe disease.
Now, back on the COVID front, does South Korea have to be concerned about the spread of the new COVID variant JN.1 that's now spreading in countries like the U.S., India, and China?
Right. So according to the WHO and the US CDC, JN.1, which is an offshoot of the BA.2.86 subvariant of Omicron, poses a low risk globally. So when we consider the risk, we are taking into account the virus's transmissibility, the virulence, and also the effectiveness of our current diagnostics and treatments. And it looks like the JN.1 subvariant is perhaps the most transmissible of all the versions of the COVID virus so far. This is probably due to increased immune evasiveness. But in terms of virulence, in other words, how severe disease it causes, it doesn't seem to be causing any more severe disease than the other circulating variants. And the good news is that our diagnostics and our treatments still seem to be effective against JN.1. Here in South Korea, we haven't made that distinction between BA.2.86 and JN.1. They're still grouped together in terms of the tracking, but it is the growing variant in terms of the number of cases that are sequenced are of the BA.2.86, and it is predicted that it will become the dominant strain in the next weeks to come.
All right, Dr. Tan, we will have to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you for having me.
South Korea's top court ruled in favor of Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor, ordering the Japanese companies responsible to compensate the victims. Choi Min-jung reports.
South Korea's Supreme Court has once again ruled in favor of Korean victims of forced labor during Japan's colonial rule between 1910 to 1945. The top court on Thursday upheld rulings that ordered 2 Japanese firms to compensate the victims. Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and Nippon Steel are ordered to pay a maximum of 150 million won, or around $115,000 to each victim. Combined with extra damages for the delay, they are ordered to pay around $900,000 in total. A total of 11 plaintiffs won the ruling, 4 against Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and 7 against Nippon Steel. However, all the plaintiffs have died of old age since the lawsuit was first filed 9 years ago. Thursday's rulings were the first such outcomes by the top court since 2018. Back then, the South Korean court made landmark rulings on separate forced labor cases, ordering the 2 Japanese companies to compensate other former Korean victims. The 2018 ruling soured relations between South Korea and Japan, as Tokyo argued that related issues were completely settled under a 1965 bilateral agreement. Japan's reaction is not much different this time around.
These rulings are in clear violation of Article 2 of the Japan-Korea Claims Agreement and are extremely regrettable and absolutely unacceptable. We have protested this matter to South Korea.
As the defendants Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and Nippon Steel are likely to continue refusing to pay the compensation, the government is expected to compensate the victims using funds procured through a public foundation. The plan was announced earlier this year to improve relations with Japan.
In line with the government's compensation plan announced in March, we plan to pay the compensation and damages for delay through the Foundation of Victims of Forced Mobilization by Imperial Japan.
With such a plan already in place and taking into account Japan's continued denial, it's unlikely that the Japanese firms will pay the compensation themselves. The Japanese companies have yet to pay the previously ordered compensation, claiming the statute of limitations has passed. But for the very first time, the court on Thursday clarified that this would not be allowed. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
South Korea and Japan have revived a long-stalled economic dialogue amid improving bilateral relations. The talks were focused on economic security and technology cooperation. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji has the details.
For the first time in 8 years, the foreign ministries of South Korea and Japan held high-level economic talks and highlighted the importance of bilateral cooperation. They took place at South Korea's Ministry of Foreign Affairs on Thursday afternoon, led by the Deputy Foreign Minister for Economic Affairs, Kang Jae-kwon, and Japan's Senior Deputy Foreign Minister, Keiichi Ono.
Regional, global, and multilateral cooperation between South Korea and Japan, which share liberal democracy and market economy, has become more important than ever, especially at a time when there's growing global economic uncertainty.
The Foreign Ministry said the two sides assessed their bilateral economic cooperation and discussed issues of mutual concern, including cooperation in economic security policies and regional and multilateral cooperation. They also decided to cooperate on securing new markets and stabilizing supply chains.
Japan and South Korea are important neighboring countries. As partners, I believe there is great potential for cooperation in terms of the economy, from supporting companies to establishing rules and responding to new tasks and technologies.
The ministry also said the two countries agreed to work together as partners pursuing common interests to ensure that the positive momentum leads to substantial economic cooperation. This is the 15th time that the two have held economic dialogue after it was first launched in 1999 to discuss comprehensive economic cooperation. It was last held in January 2016 in Tokyo. The Japanese government postponed the meeting in late 2016 when a statue of a girl symbolizing Korean victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery was built in front of the Japanese consulate in South Korea's port city of Busan. The meeting remained suspended as bilateral relations between Seoul and Tokyo worsened over several issues stemming from Japan's colonial rule of Korea before and during World War II. Then bilateral relations started to improve starting March this year, after South Korea announced its plan to compensate victims of Japan's wartime forced labor. The leaders of the two countries had agreed in July to resume the high-level economic dialogue by the end of this year. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Russia says it has established active, comprehensive defense cooperation with North Korea. That is according to the chief of the Russian General Staff, Valery Gerasimov, on Thursday in a conference with foreign military attaches. He also said the creation of NATO-like military blocs in the Asia-Pacific region, such as AUKUS and the Trilateral Alliance between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, increase instability in the region and allow member countries to develop nuclear weapons. The remarks come as South Korea and the U.S. have been raising concerns about strengthening military cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang following a summit held in September. Hamas says if Israel wants its hostages to be returned alive, there is no choice but to end the war in Gaza. According to the spokesperson of Hamas's military wing, the Al-Qassam brigades, the release of more hostages depends on whether or not Israel ends its aggressions. He added that Israel would not be able to achieve its goal of eliminating the militant group. The group also released a video of the 3 Israeli male hostages killed in error by the Israel Defense Forces last week, saying Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was responsible for their deaths. South Korea's National Assembly has passed a budget for next year worth some $500 billion. This comes 3 weeks later than the initial deadline due to disputes over cuts in R&D spending. Our Munerian has the details.
After months of debate, the country's spending plans for the coming year are set. The National Assembly passed the budget bill in a plenary session on Thursday. While the statutory processing deadline was almost 3 weeks ago, the 2 rival parties had failed to reach an agreement until now. There's been several changes made to the proposal submitted by the Finance Ministry in August, from the total budget to how much has been allocated to each sector. The total budget is some 656.6 trillion Korean won, or roughly $500 billion. But that's around $180 million lower than the proposed amount. Fiscal soundness is becoming increasingly important due to the country's rising debt to GDP ratio. The projected debt to GDP ratio for 2024 is 51%. As a result, the government proposed cutting the budget for the R&D, education and public administration sectors to reduce spending. But the unprecedented slash in the research and development sector sparked debate, as it's the first time since 1991 that R&D has seen a decrease compared to the year before, with the proposed budget seeing a 16.6% drop from 2023. The final budget saw increases in budgets for science and technology, industry, SMEs and energy, social welfare and transport, but drops in public administration and local government budgets, as well as a decrease in the national defense budget compared to the proposal. The budget bill proposed earlier this year had a focus on strengthening social welfare, and this was reflected in the final spending plan for 2024. There was a concentration on supporting young people in particular. An additional $53 million designated for extending housing support for young people, and nearly $17 million for an initiative to give young people discounts for using public transport. It's not just young people, however, who will be benefiting from the changes in the budget proposal. An extra $4.3 million has been added to support farmers and fishermen with their electricity bills, and the pension system for the handicapped will see the biggest rise since 2013 with an additional $21 million. Meanwhile, the development project in the reclaimed wetland area of Saemangum was another major point of contention, and the 2 parties agreed to increase its budget by $230 million. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Kim Siyoung, and now we turn over to stories from around the world. We begin today in the Czech Republic, where a mass shooting at Charles University in Prague on Thursday has killed at least 14 and injured 25. Prague's police chief has confirmed that a lone gunman, who was also a student at the university, was behind this bloodshed. Prague Police Chief Martin Vondrasek reported on Thursday evening that the 24-year-old gunman has also died, with no information released yet on the exact identity. The shooting took place in the philosophy department of the university near the Jan Palach Square. Police reported that the shooter was an excellent student with no criminal record and that he legally owned several guns. Vondrasek also said that the gunman also allegedly killed his father at his home earlier on Thursday. Based on a search of the gunman's home, he is also suspected of killing another man and his 2-month-old daughter on December 15th in the east of Prague. Now, former New York mayor and longtime associate of former President Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on Thursday, days after being ordered to pay almost $150 million in a defamation case. 79-year-old Giuliani was sued for defamation by 2 former Georgia election workers who he claimed had tried to steal votes from Donald Trump during the 2020 presidential election. An 8-person federal jury in Washington ordered Giuliani to pay $148 million in damages to the plaintiffs Ruby Freedom and Wandria Moss last week. Giuliani's bankruptcy filing showed millions of dollars in unpaid taxes and legal fees, listing nearly 20 creditors, including Hunter Biden, who sued him in September. Over to Ukraine now, where the country's parliament passed a new law on Thursday to legalize medical marijuana, with thousands suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder due to the war with Russia. The new law, proposed by Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, passed by a 248-vote majority in the 401-seat parliament in Kiev and will come into effect 6 months after President Volodymyr Zelensky signs the bill. According to one lawmaker, medical cannabis is needed and will benefit 6 million Ukrainians, including cancer patients. While the law will allow cannabis to be obtained with a doctor's prescription, recreational use of cannabis will remain a criminal offense. With Christmas Day just around the corner, celebrations and decorations are lighting up all parts of the world. From snowy South Korea's Christmas markets to London's glamorous boutique retail streetlights, and from Sydney's summertime harbour displays and decorations to Bogota's Christmas botanical gardens, the world is celebrating the festive season as we approach the year's end. War-torn Ukraine is also preparing a celebration of their first Western calendar Christmas on December 25th, in an effort to erase Russian influence of celebrating the holiday on January 7th, according to the Julian calendar.
Good morning. Today is the winter solstice, and we're waking up to another numbingly cold morning with the biting wind. Jeju seems to be the only part of Korea waking up to temperatures above the freezing mark. But the resort island is receiving heavy snowfall, causing headaches for travelers planning to spend a Christmas holiday on the island. Jeju and the west coast will continue to see snow through tomorrow morning, with heavy snow alerts issued in those areas. Mountainous regions on Jeju could see more than 30 centimeters, and western parts of Jeolla provinces could receive more than 10 centimeters of snowfall. East Coast regions, meanwhile, are under strong wind and dry alerts, so the nation is going through frightful weather this week. And highs in Seoul will be only topping out at -7 degrees Celsius. It will continue to feel like being in a freezer through tomorrow. Then much more bearable weather is on tap from Christmas Eve. So until then, take care. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That is all for today. Thanks for watching.